When you picture Mumbai, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Is it the glamour of Bollywood, the hustle of its financial district, maybe the old cotton trade? Well, let me tell you, the real story of how this megacity got its start is way more surprising and a whole lot darker than you probably think. Every great city has its own origin story, right? There's always some big economic engine that powered its rise. For Mumbai, the story we're usually told is about cotton or finance. But we're going to peel back those layers of history and find the secret ingredient, the one thing that actually built the city from the ground up. Now, don't get me wrong, the cotton mills were a huge deal in the 19th century, for sure. But they weren't the original source of the city's incredible wealth. That seed money, that initial capital, had to come from somewhere else first. And Bollywood, the biggest film industry on the planet, that came much, much later. It was a result of the city's wealth, not the cause of it. So if it wasn't cotton and it wasn't cinema, what was it? The answer, believe it or not, is opium. We're talking about the railways, the docks, the massive fortunes of its merchants, even the great universities. Almost all of it can be traced back to a single, incredibly powerful and ridiculously profitable global drug trade. So how on earth did that happen? Well, our story starts with the British East India Company. Back in the late 18th century, they built this massive monopoly with one very clear goal: use a very specific product to bankroll the entire British Empire in Asia. And the system they came up with was just ruthlessly efficient. The company took control of the best opium-growing lands, forced farmers to grow poppy, and then paid them a fixed, super low price, which often trapped them in a cycle of debt. The opium was then processed in their own factories, auctioned off in Calcutta, and smuggled illegally into China. This wasn't just some side business. It was a full-blown, state-run narcotics operation on an industrial scale. And the profits, they were absolutely staggering. We're talking profit margins of 400 to 500%. This was a core pillar of British economic strategy in Asia. And let's be really clear about this. This whole operation wasn't about supplying some recreational demand. No, this was a calculated, industrial-scale business designed to generate huge amounts of cash to fund the entire colonial government and its military. But here's the twist. The company didn't control all of India. And that little gap opened the door for a rival system, one that wasn't run by the state, but by private merchants, all operating out of a city on the west coast, Bombay. So you've basically got this direct competition going on. While the British East India Company had a lock on the east, these private traders focused on the Malwa region out west. And get this, they paid farmers double what the company was paying, which meant they got a stronger, much more desirable product. Then, instead of shipping it through the company's port in Calcutta, they built their own smuggling route right out of Bombay. They were literally outsmarting the empire at its own game. And the mastermind behind this whole rival operation was a man named Jamsetji Jejapoi. He was this incredibly bold entrepreneur who looked at the company's monopoly and didn't see a barrier. He saw a massive business opportunity. Of course, the British tried to shut him down. In 1805, they banned all private opium exports. But did that stop Jejapoi? Nope. He just rerouted his ships through nearby Portuguese ports like Daman and Diu. By 1823, his personal fortune had made him the richest man in India. Eventually, the British realized they just couldn't beat him, so they decided to join him. In 1830, they made the Bombay trade legal and just started taxing it instead. Okay, so this is the real turning point. A trade that was once totally illegal is now a state-approved cash cow for both private merchants and the British government. But that leads to the big question, right? How does all that money get turned from profit into pavement, from cash into a city? This is where the money literally hits the map. These vast profits from opium didn't just vanish into bank accounts. They were plowed right back into the city itself, transforming Bombay from a scattered group of islands into a proper modern metropolis. And it happened in two main ways. On one hand, you had Jamsetji Jejapoi, who used his enormous fortune to fund things like hospitals, schools, and even the causeways that connected Bombay's islands together. Then, on the other hand, the British used their new tax money to fund huge public projects, including India's very first passenger railway, which ran out of Bombay in 1853. But the impact didn't just stop with buildings and train tracks. The initial capital that came from opium started this incredible ripple effect. It planted the seeds for brand new industries and created these legendary business empires that would go on to shape India for the next 100 years. So, after the Opium Wars forced China to open its markets, a whole new wave of players jumped into the game. The most famous was probably David Sassoon, a merchant who built a massive trading empire based in Bombay, with opium as its incredibly profitable cornerstone. And what this did was create a powerful economic chain reaction. You can think of it in steps. Step 1, make a fortune in the opium trade. Step 2, take that seed money and reinvest it into the next big thing. In this case, cotton mills. Step 3, use the profits from cotton to expand into even more industries. That's pretty much how the city's entire industrial ecosystem was born. And you can still see the results of this chain reaction all over Mumbai today. The famous Sassoon docks, that was built with an opium fortune. The legendary Tata Empire, one of the giants of Indian industry, it traces its roots right back to this ecosystem. Even iconic landmarks like the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel were built with capital that ultimately grew out of the opium trade. So when you really stop and look at the physical city of Mumbai, at its economic landscape, it all starts to click. The port, the old mills, the railway lines that crisscross the city, and the very families who built its economy, they all connect back to this one single controversial source. Which brings us right back to where we started. The foundational capital, the spark that ignited the city's incredible growth. It wasn't cotton. It wasn't cinema. It was opium. And that's the profound, complicated, and often buried history of Mumbai. It's a true world-class city, but it stands on the foundations of a global drug trade, a trade that not only financed an empire and created unbelievable fortunes, but also laid the very groundwork for the metropolis we see today.